name is Julian Widdows and I'm Vice President of Natural Motion's racing business. Natural Motion is a developer of free-to-play mobile games for iOS and Google Play platforms. We're based in Covent Garden in the UK, in London, and we have a studio in Brighton on the south coast of the UK. But all the racing development is done in our head office in London, and then with partner teams around the world. And we're best known for a game called CSR Racing 2, which is currently available on the iOS and the Google Play app stores.
Thank you for being here, Julian.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes. So we just witnessed your keynote. You had a packed audience. What all of us actually want to know is how you actually got involved in gaming in the first place.
Yeah, so I fell in love with games quite late in life.
Right.
When I was very young, about 7 years old, my dad bought me, mum and dad bought me actually for Christmas, one of the old Atari consoles. And I think Adventure was the first game that really inspired me. I absolutely adored that game. But then for many years, I didn't really play that frequently until I was probably about 13, 14, when I fell in love with PC gaming. And it was particularly a game from Bullfrog called Syndicate that got me massively hooked on video games. And suddenly there was this medium that created the type of content and the type of interactive environments that I just loved. I mean, the freedom in that game was astonishing. This Blade Runner-esque futuristic world where you control these cyborgs or soldiers. And I have to say, it's probably the first time in my life where I saw something where I thought, God, I'd really, really like to do that. I then went to university and I did a degree in French, of all things. I spent a year in Paris and I thought, well, maybe I can get a part-time job in Paris, working in a video games company. I was doing a French degree, so I was learning how to speak French. And I got a job at a company called US Gold, and it was the first proper job I'd ever had, and it was certainly my first job in gaming.
Right.
I basically had to work in US Gold and man their technical support helplines. So I'd have people calling me in French, and I had to try and help them with their support issues in the best French that I had, which wasn't terribly good at the time. So I have to apologise to every consumer I spoke to over that period, because I'm sure they got terrible service. But at the end of the day, I fell in love with the gaming industry at that point. And when I left university, I thought, well, what else can I do actually? Right. What else can I do in gaming? I looked down the list of credits of, it was UFO Enemy Unknown, a game by a company called Microprose. And I looked at the jobs and thought, program, I don't really program. I'd done some BBC micro programming, but I wasn't a programmer. Art, not a terribly talented artist, at that point in my life. So I thought, well, I'm probably not going to be an artist.
Right.
Producer, that sounds good. I wonder what one of those does. And so I kind of searched about what producers did. I could definitely do that. I applied for loads of jobs. And I successfully didn't get any of them. And I thought, right, well, that's not working. So what else can I do? And so I applied for a quality assurance role. And I actually got the first role that I applied for in quality assurance, testing games in French. I moved to London. Started working for a company called Time Warner Interactive, testing games like Zed by the Bitmap Brothers and Sensible World of Soccer. And that's when I started 22 years ago.
Oh, wow. You've also then gone on to work with franchises like the James Bond and Dirt in the Grid. I mean, what was that experience like? I mean, obviously coming fairly early in your career.
Yeah, I mean, working on the Bond franchise was amazing. It was really incredible. I had worked on licensed products before. A couple of years before I moved to Activision to work on James Bond, I'd worked on the 50 Cent license. So I had experience of working with licensed properties. And Bond, though, I mean, it's such an iconic brand, it's such a British brand, to have the opportunity to work with that franchise and the people who created that franchise, to work with one of my most beloved characters from my childhood was astonishing. And one of the elements of that franchise that we were working on at the time was the sequel to the N64 game GoldenEye 007. And so to have the opportunity to create the sequel to that game was like a dream come true. I got to collaborate with some amazing creatives, to work with Eon Pictures and Dan Jack, who are responsible for the franchise, to really tap into the creative spirit that's carried through from the earliest Bond films all the way through to Daniel Craig films today. Was remarkable. I mean, it's a remarkable experience actually. So yeah, it's been an amazing ride. To work on brands of that scale is just, it's invigorating.
Right. So you've gone from James Bond to CSR2. What is that like? I mean, yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question, right? What is it like to go from James Bond to CSR2? Well, there was a period in between actually when I finished working on the Bond franchise and I started working on racing games. I moved back to my area, the West Midlands, to work for a company called Codemasters, running the Dirt and Grid games from their Southam studio in Warwickshire. And it was really incredible. I mean, Codemasters were an iconic developer. They were super well known to everyone in the West Midlands and actually around the UK. They'd obviously made their name in racing games, but also developed the Brian Lara cricket game.
Of course, we all remember that. We all know that.
Well, so it's
one of the few games I played growing up.
Well, actually, so my studio, Swordfish Studios, worked on Brian Lara cricket.
Right.
So we had this really great connection with Codemasters, and it's a company I'd always wanted to work for. Ended up working on racing games for 3 years, but during that period became more and more inspired by service-based gaming, by the power and potential of mobile gaming. And I knew probably a year before I ended up moving on from Codemasters that that's what I wanted to do. So I started talking to whoever I could find really to talk to about mobile games and free-to-play games. Met Torsten, the founder of Natural Motion, and Barclay, the VP of Games at Natural Motion. Explained I had an aspiration to work in mobile free-to-play, and they said, well, look, we have this opportunity for you. It's a small studio at the moment. There's 4 people. Sorry, I tell a lie, actually. At that time, it was 8 people in a studio in East London. Come and meet them, and if you'd like to work with them on the sequel to CSR, we'd be really happy to invite you in. So I went down and I met the 8 guys in the studio, tiny little office overlooking a canal. And I fell in love with the office, I fell in love with the people, and the opportunity actually to bring my experiences of working on really big teams actually. We had 150 people at Codemasters at the time, but prior to that there were about 250 working on Bond. And scale this team to deliver AAA quality, contemporary, cutting-edge graphics on mobile, as well as extending the CSR franchise. I couldn't resist it, so I moved to London, took the job, and the rest is history, right? That was 5 years ago, nearly 5 years ago.
Well, that's been quite a while. So obviously, then if you look at the growth of the industry in the last 5 years, I mean, we've obviously seen mobile gaming become a lot bigger with the emerging populations in India and China coming into the fore. What do you make of augmented and virtual reality? I mean, I do know CSR launched an augmented reality, one of the first of its kind, about a year ago. So what have you made of the growth prospects of the immersive technologies?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think at the moment VR and AR are in a very, very, very interesting place. We're obviously focused more on the AR side of things because we're in the mobile industry, and naturally we design games and design features to be mass market accessible and to travel with people wherever they go. I mean, that's how how business has become so successful. And so as those technologies emerge, naturally we're consumers of the best VR content. We really enjoy it when we're playing console games at home. When it comes to mobile, for us, AR is really the thing that can genuinely make a game better or enhance certain elements of the experience if it's appropriate for the content. And I think that's true of any technology and any game design decision, right? That it has to be appropriate for your audience and your content. And in the case of AR for us, putting firstly AR Kit and then AR Core into our game was so natural, because what CSR2 is really, it's the fantasy of building a dream garage of cars. It's the fantasy of doing something that I doubt whether I will ever experience, maybe you will, of taking delivery of a Bugatti Divo or a Ferrari 458 Speciale or a new McLaren. These are fantasies that so few people will ever get to really access. And we give people that fantasy. And because we build the interiors of the cars, the engine bays and the bonnets, allowing them then to put those cars in the real world and actually put them next to the real cars, it's like owning your own version. And so it's entirely sympathetic with our game. So AR for us makes a whole load of sense.
It does.
And obviously our consumers have loved it. And you can see that from all the content they create of them standing by their cars and putting a Porsche next to a Porsche in the real world. When I was traveling around the US early this year with my family, I took great pride at putting my Lamborghini next to a fleet of Lamborghinis outside the hotel. So I had my own Lamborghini there as well. So AR for us is an important part of what we do.
Right. So, in also now going back to your keynote, you did speak about your approach to working with people, right? I mean, talking about the people first approach and the live operations approach and a whole bunch of other things. You spoke quite eloquently about. Can you just, summarize your 40-minute keynote into perhaps 30 seconds?
Can I summarize my 40-minute keynote? Well, only half of it was about people. So now I've only got to summarize 20 minutes.
And you're running out of time.
And I'm running out of time, and then the clock is definitely ticking. Can I summarize it? It's a people-first approach. We hire, retain and develop curious, emotionally intelligent, very smart people with growth mindsets who really want to make a difference and deliver great content and collaborate with great people. We bring them into a thinking culture where we systematically try to get the very best thinking from them. And we do that using a structure called the thinking environment, which was designed by one of my heroes, a lady called Nancy Klein, who has really dedicated her life to thinking about thinking.
So also, now that we hear about thinking, I mean, what kind of role do you think diversity of thought or diversity of gender have to do with pretty much everything that Natural Motion has been able to accomplish over the last many years?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, if we look at diversity, it's very easy to focus only on what's visible and obvious. I found out quite recently, I didn't know this, my great-great-great-grandparents are Russian-Polish Jews who emigrated from Europe via London to Liverpool, then married into a family called Lane, and then, that's my family. I didn't know this until earlier this year. This is like a real revelation for me. So of course, when we think about diversity, often we focus on what's outwardly visible. And we're really fortunate in London, that we can draw from a global talent pool. And therefore, it's quite easy for us to hire the best talent, regardless of gender, ethnicity, orientation, race, creed, colour. Really quite easy. Our team have representatives from every continent on planet Earth. We've got developers from over 15 countries around the world. At one point, and I'm not sure whether this is true now actually, we were over 50% non-white British. So from an ethnicity perspective, we do have representatives, but nobody was hired on that basis. They were hired because they were the best person to do the job. We're just fabulously lucky that in the United Kingdom, at least at the moment, it's a very multicultural society, and the development community for sure, that's drawn to London, comes from everywhere on earth. North America, South America, India, Africa, Europe, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe. I mean, you name it, we have developers who come from everywhere. But really, when we think about diversity within the context of the thinking environment, what that gives us is representatives of a global audience. And because of the macro cultures they come from, they can speak to the needs and their desires of their macro cultures, right? And so from a commercial perspective, it enables us to understand better our customers and what's important to people in different countries around the world. Within the thinking environment, though, we actually really, really value cognitive diversity. So the way that people think, and that's invisible. We can't really see that. We can't look at each other. We could think in exactly the same way. Right. Cognitive diversity is about how people solve problems. How do they think? How do they challenge? How do they bring themselves to bear on the problems? And actually, that's one of the things that requires more nurturing because it's not visible. It's not obvious, right?
It's all about where people come from and their own stories, their own upbringing.
That's exactly it. The imprints they've had over their life, the lessons they've learned, the mistakes they've made, the conditioning, what they've been taught, what they learnt in their previous job, what their aspirations are. All of these things, and actually, to a degree, I imagine, a little bit of nature in there as well about the qualities they bring. Whether they're introverts, extroverts, maybe they're ADHD or on that, ADHD spectrum. It doesn't matter. They have something to offer, and often, this is something that I found really over the past, I suppose, 5 years since we've been using the system. Some of the best learnings and opportunities are when you feel conflicted, when someone challenges you, respectfully, but they're challenging you like, oh wow, that really shook something inside me. That spoke to my value system, or that spoke to what I believe is true. And that's the point at which you lean back and you welcome that diversity in and say, okay, someone is saying something that I don't think now. How do we nurture that spirit? And that's something we've really tried hard to do. So, yeah, we're super fortunate. London's a great place to build a diverse team, but cognitive diversity is something I think you have to nurture regardless of all other qualities.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot now. You have obviously worked on a great many franchises over your career. What is the one franchise that you wish you were working on?
Well, that's the one franchise I wish I was working on. Obviously, I'm going to say I'm all about people, right? And it's about the team, and I adore my team. I mean, I adore them. They make me proud every single day. And I joked in my keynote and was also serious that as leaders, we're frauds. We don't do any hard work. I mean, other people do all the hard work, right? But if I was to go back through my career and say which one game would I at that point have gone, I'd love to work on that game, it would be the original Syndicate by Bullfrog. It just set me alight and set me on a career path that's rewarded me for 22 years. So if there's one game I could have worked on, and I would love my name to be against, it'd be Syndicate, because to this day I still think that game's absolutely beautiful. I love it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Yes. Yes. I mean, now you can address the camera if you want. If you want to talk a little bit more about your thoughts about the Indian community, the Indian game industry, if that's something that you want, or
I don't know if I'd have anything particularly salient to offer.
Right.
I mean, because I'll just waffle, and I'll waffle about the things that I often waffle about. It's just. I guess the one thing I would say is when I first started out in my career 22 years ago, a little bit longer if you include that time in Paris, but let's ignore that for a second. 22 years ago, there was a really famous trade show in the United Kingdom called ECTS. I think it was the European Consumer Trade Show, I think. I'm not sure what the acronym is. And I remember going to those trade shows for the first time at Olympia in London. And the sense of potential and the sense of vibrancy and the sense of urgency that there was a community of people building magic, doing something spectacular. And ahead of us, we could all see this road. And this sense of collaboration and togetherness that we had as an industry was really inspiring. And obviously now I've been in it for 22 years. And spending time with some of the community last night and spending time at the conference today and talking to people, that energy is palpable. I mean, really palpable at this conference. And that's utterly inspiring to seeing a whole new generation of game makers utterly in love with the medium and the potential they've got to touch gamers' lives. And so that's really, really inspired me.
Well, there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.